welcome to Carson's Call. I am your host, Carson, and thank you all for joining me on episode 1 of my new political commentary channel. Let me start by introducing myself. I am a national conservative. I am pro-working class. I believe in economies and markets that benefit the nation. I believe in meritocracy. I believe we should be taking green initiatives to preserve our planet and protect our climate. I am a nationalist who strives for cultural preservation. And above all, I am a Christian who believes everyone was made equally under the eyes of our Lord and Savior God. Now, let's start this first episode with a topic I believe remains relevant in our current political climate, and that is political extremism. Now, as we all know, political extremism has existed for as long as time. However, in recent events, I believe that political extremism has begun to rise further and further and further up, and inflicting more violence, more fear, more polarization, and above all, more danger to the majority of the American population. There's this article published by the National Library of Medicine which linked social media to greater political extremism. Now, what I found particularly interesting about this article is how it essentially is saying that social media is a crucial aspect for propagandizing political extremism. Now, in this research, very detailed, very in-depth research, they found that people are more likely to take extreme stances rather than more moderate ones. What this means is if you are on a scale of 1 to 10, a 6, you're about halfway, you're in the central point of, let's say the left or right. Now, if you're on social media and you see someone who is, let's say, an 8 start talking about something, they are 2 points farther to the right or left than you are. You are more likely to agree with them than you are someone who is, say, a 5, as they are not as extreme as you are and more moderate. People have begun to perceive political segregation as a inevitable outcome of social media political extremism. As people want to stand out more in their groups and be more of a unique individual for their political stance, they find that they are able to become more unique, stand out more, gather more attention because of social media. It has become a crucial part of extremist propaganda to use social media so they can gather more people onto their side, so they can pass on their views, and so they can greater divide our nation. Now, as we all know, there's extremism on both the right and the left. Now, let's start with the right side of things. Now, people on the right who are more extreme than others are typically reactionary conservatives. And what they want, plain and simple on paper, is a return to a previous state of society. Now, this does not sound too bad. I mean, it's pretty simple. I mean, who doesn't want to go back to when times were better, However, this typically leads into them perceiving other people as threats. For example, people become more nativist, become ultra-nationalistic, and ethno-nationalist. Neo-Nazis, white supremacists, KKK members, all the sorts. They are these types of people. Now, I do not believe there's anything wrong, with being nationalist or ethno-nationalist or a nativist. However, it can get to a point where it is extreme. It becomes deadly. It becomes threatening to other people. Neo-Nazis, for example, very against Jewish populations. And, you got white supremacists who believe, everyone else is inferior to the white man. And then you got the KKK, who is pretty similar, but they have a stronger bias against black minorities. Now, obviously, have whatever views you want. But the point is that you can get too extreme where you become a threat to other people. And this is what we need less of in our society. We have political assassinations, we have organized violence, organized attacks, we have all sorts of inappropriate actions being taken almost every day in our nation because people are becoming too extreme with their beliefs. If you have a belief, that's one thing, but carrying out in a form of violence is not acceptable whatsoever. And with the reactionary conservative movement, people become more violent, which leads to a great slippery slope that leads to genocide and authoritarianism, which, as we have seen in history, for example, Nazi Germany, Hitler rises to power, and his bias against Jewish people above all others led to, the genocide, the Holocaust of the Jews, and for him to become an authoritarian figure. He became a dictator in Nazi Germany. He led his party with an iron fist. His entire nation bowed to his command. All the sorts. It leads to problems that become unacceptable, and then it can get to a point where you cannot combat it. All of this is fueled by hatred, and this does apply to both the left and right. However, I do believe, as a right winger myself, that there is more hatred fueling political movements and actions on the right than there is the left. Left wing extremists typically do not have a hierarchy, whereas on the right there is. There's one sole figure, a dictator, a powerful leader to lead the political extremists. However, on the left, that's not very typical. What they typically do is they react to events that occur. And what happens is they become revolutionary and insurgency. For example, Black Lives Matter. In 2020, when George Floyd died, you know, left-wing extremists took that event and reacted absurdly to it. They were rioting, they were protesting everywhere. White guilt became this crazy thing that, if you weren't guilty for being white, you're a racist. We segregated people based off of race very strongly in 2020 for whatever reason. I don't know why we're going back to segregation, but let's move forward. Now, most left-wing extremists are opposed to capitalism. Obviously, eat the rich, kill all billionaires, stuff like that. They are opposed to neoliberalism. They will not accept neoliberal politics. And it's not because it's right wing. It's not because it's, a bad political ideology. It's because it's not left wing enough. You get to a point in extremism where other people who are on your side are not good enough for you. You view them as your enemy because they do not agree entirely and blindly with your political ideology. And lastly, globalization, they're strongly opposed to that as well. Something that I have noticed with left-wing extremists is that they view violence as a more acceptable means of societal change. Now, this has been seen in times and times again. We have the American Revolution, the French Revolution. We even had revolutions in Nazi Germany, people rising up against Hitler when the war was turning against the favor of the Germans. Now, am I saying that all three of these were incidents where it was inappropriate? No. Revolution can definitely be necessary means of societal change. And I do not think we should, toss it out the window altogether. But I do think some people are too open to just starting a revolution. Violence should not be the first answer to a problem that poses itself. If, George Floyd died, today, do I think people should be getting violent because of that? No. If a left-wing politician like Kamala Harris was assassinated, do I believe that the left has a right to become violent? No. I do not think anyone should be getting violent under any means. That is very inappropriate. We all know this. If you're going to fight fire with fire, you're just going to create a bigger fire. And as Gandhi said, an eye for an eye makes the whole world blind. Take that as you will. Some of the popular left wing extremist groups currently are Antifa and the Squad. Now, Antifa, as we all know, is short for anti fascist, which on paper, nothing wrong with that. We should be opposed to fascism, this authoritarian, right wing political extremist ideology. However, Antifa, I do not endorse their actions. They are unreasonably violent, they are very inappropriate, they're discriminatory, and they are left wing extremist. You're fighting a right wing extremist ideology with your left wing extremist group. Now, the Squad, if some of you guys don't know, is a political democratic group in the U.S., primarily consisting of, now, forgive me for my mispronunciation of these four names. We have AOC, Ihan Omar, Ayanna Pressley, and Rashida Tlaib. Don't know how you pronounce those names, but whatever. Now, these four ladies are the farthest left Democratic House representatives currently. And all four of them, they have some very extreme political views. For example, defunding the police. Idiotic. We should not be defunding the police, our law enforcement. You know how stupid that is? To defund our law enforcement. If there was danger outside your front door and you already surrendered your arms, you don't have guns, all you have is like a kitchen knife, but there's a burglar or someone outside with a gun trying to break into your house, what are you going to do? Are you really going to take a knife to a gunfight? Do you really expect that to go well? Well, you can't call the police. You defunded them. Even if you do call them and they get there, it's probably going to be late or they're going to be incompetent. And let's be honest, if you're taking a knife to a gunfight, you're probably going to die. Um, the Squad also believes in massive tax hikes, not only for the rich, but for everyone, so they can have these socialist programs for the entire nation. Now, do I believe there are some aspects of socialism that could benefit society? Yes. I do think we should have these government assistive programs to help those in need, people who cannot fend for themselves, people who cannot live without assistance from someone else, people who need a little bit of help because they can't make it on their own. I do not have a problem with that. However, the tax hikes and the socialist agenda that the Squad has, I have a problem with. I do not believe we should just altogether remove, classes. We should not have a classless society. That's I am a strong advocate for meritocracy. If you are better than someone else, you should be rewarded for being better than someone else. And tax hikes for these socialist programs so we can have a classless society is bizarre and stupid. They are also supportive of Medicare for all, and for those of you who don't know, Medicare for all also brings upon massive tax increases, um, which, let's be honest, we already have intense taxes in this nation, and having like what 40% of our total income be thrown away to taxes is utterly ridiculous, especially when we're sending billions of dollars to foreign nations that could not care less about America. Um, Another thing, Medicare for all is it would just create a less responsive system. Healthcare already as it is sucks in our country. Let's be honest. You pay a lot, you get good quality healthcare, but it's very expensive. Now, obviously they want Medicare for all, hence why it's called that. But, what's going to happen is, as people have found, is that it would just create a less responsive system. So you can go to the hospital and you'd be sitting there for months, weeks, who knows how long before you get treatment for a very urgent matter. I do not think I would want to sit around for an extended period of time with something that's actively killing me. just because I wanted it to be cheaper or free. Finally, resource strain, which kind of ties into the less responsive system. If we have fewer resources, we're going to be able to treat fewer people, or we're going to be able to treat people less effectively. It's just going to be a negative agenda altogether, Medicare for all. We should not be doing things like this that would create systems that work less effectively and that cannot cater to everyone. Do I think we need a healthcare reform? Yes. The current state of our healthcare system in America is garbage. But Medicare for all is definitely not the solution. They also are supportive of the Green New Deal, and I find this one to be quite comical because Biden, when he was in office, he was opposed to the Green New Deal. And as everyone knows, Joe Biden was very stern and firm on, green energy and transitioning to green policies that would help our climate and help us with addressing climate change. And I don't have a problem with that, but obviously, I think, and I think most Americans can agree, is that Joe Biden was a little too extreme on his green policies. But he, who was, we'll just say, for all intents and purposes, moderate on climate change, he opposed the Green New Deal. The squad, however, they were very supportive of it. So much so that they protested outside the Democratic National Headquarters because of his opposition to the Green New Deal. How much of a baby do you have to be to go outside your headquarters and protest because your presidential nominee, who is now the president, is opposed to the Green New Deal while implementing all these other green policies? You don't get one thing and you're going to throw a fit like that? I mean, grow up. Anyways, the Green New Deal, if it were, passed through the House, the Senate, and whatever, would increase energy prices significantly. Now, if you thought under Joe Biden that your energy prices were high enough as is, or you think they are now because of AI, now imagine that 3 or 4 times the cost because of the Green New Deal, because they're cutting off all sorts of non renewable energy. The cost of living in America is already absurdly high, and with us being taxed so heavily, people would not be able to live comfortably at all. If they have Medicare for all, they increase taxes on everyone, and they pass the Green New Deal, can you imagine what the cost of living would be? 40% of your income goes to taxes to foreign nations that don't care about us. Then you have 60% of your income left. However, your taxes are probably going to be increased, so let's say 50%. Now you only have 50% of your income. However, now we got massive tax increases for Medicare for all. So we'll just say you're at 60% of your income being taxed away. You have 40% left to spend. Oh, but the Green New Deal now costs a lot more. You will be able to afford less energy, or you'll have the same amount of energy and you'll be paying even more. Now imagine having like 35% of your income left. You put away 10% for savings, you are left with 25% of your income. And we already all know that's not going to help with the housing crisis, out of control rent prices, and just basic cost of goods being absurdly high. If they passed the tax hikes for everyone, Medicare for all, and the Green New Deal, we Americans would have no money to ourselves. We would not be able to afford rent or houses at all. Now, I already know we already are struggling with that, but imagine almost everyone is. Additionally, the Green New Deal would obviously cripple the economy. I mean, if we don't have energy or we have super expensive energy, how are we going to be able to function as a society? We wouldn't be able to transport goods. We wouldn't be able to connect with one another. We wouldn't be able to do anything. Our economy would be crippled within weeks because energy prices have soared through the roof. Finally, now this one is more my personal uh, disfavoring of the Green New Deal, and that is the government overreach into private sectors. The government would have more power than it already does, and it would be reaching into private sectors of our society. They would have control over energy suppliers. Why would we willingly want our government to become more authoritarian and to be able to have access to our energy suppliers? Oh, that's right, because they want a socialist form of government where the government has overreach over every private sector. It's a slippery slope, like I said earlier. However, unlike the right, where the slippery slope leads to genocide and authoritarianism, this slippery slope leads to greater authoritarianism. However, it's all painted all nice because Medicare for all, the billionaires are being eaten up, and hey, we have clean energy. It's the same end goal, just without the genocide and painted nicer. Why would anybody want such a thing? Thankfully, the squad and their agendas have failed and have not made it out of the House. But if they were to, under a Democratic government, let's say 2028, Republicans lose the House, the Senate, Congress, and the office, and the Democrats came in, they had the majority, what is stopping them from passing these socialist agendas? These socialist policies would cripple our economy. They would increase the cost of living tenfold, and we would become a very authoritarian country. Now, obviously, we wouldn't have one central key figure because they don't believe in hierarchy, but the government would have such a great reach into all the private sectors of our life that nothing would be privately owned. We would have a classless society, which basically would be leading us to communism. Now, with extremists, we see great polarization with each side. You got like, oh, the left side's racist, the right side's racist, the left side's this, the right side's that. What happens is only a single truth gets promoted. This us versus them mentality is created. People are our enemies, they're not our neighbors. When a single truth is pushed out and has to be accepted, or you're not with them, centrism is pushed away. You cannot have moderate beliefs. You have to have an extremist belief, or you're not part of this group. You're not part of that side. And you can see that nowadays. I mean, I have friends who are on the left, and, I have some left wing views. But some of my friends who are a lot more extreme than I am say I don't have any left wing views because I don't agree more with them. If I agree partially with what they're saying, I'm not agreeing with the single truth that they are promoting. And you know what happens? They don't view me as someone sensible, someone who's moderate. They don't view me as someone who has some partial agreement to their statements. It's either you are with me or you are against me. This dealing in absolutes only creates greater extremism. And I hate to say this because I don't want to put labels on each side, but it is definitely something you see more with the left wing than you do the right wing. There is greater diversity of political beliefs and statements on the right than there is the left. You know, we become more discriminatory and we villainize each other. Why would we as a society want to discriminate against each other because of our political beliefs? We need to work together. things the left does right and things the right does right. We need to combine our efforts together, not push each other away. We're not going to dehumanize each other because of our political beliefs. We are not going to villainize each other because of our political beliefs. We are not going to discriminate and segregate because of our political beliefs. We are the United States of America. We need to unite our beliefs. And people are out here discriminating because, oh, you're not left wing enough, you're not right wing enough. It's us versus them. You know how stupid and arrogant you sound when you say that? And then, when we begin to villainize each other, oh, you're a Nazi, oh, you're a socialist, you're a communist, you're a racist, whatever, more hate crimes are committed. We justify our comments so we can get away with these crimes. Now, I've seen many people on the right get called Nazis for the simplest of things. I have been called a Nazi because I have right wing views. I am not a Nazi. I despise Nazis. I do not think anyone should be that extreme at all. However, since I have right wing views, I am inherently labeled as a Nazi by a good chunk of people on the left. And you know what happens? Oh, he's a Nazi. We need to kill all Nazis. That gives me an excuse to kill this person or punch this person, vandalize this person's property, whatever it is. When we create these labels, we use those labels as excuses to commit hate crimes. We cannot be doing this. We should not tolerate this. This behavior should be punishable. If you are going to justify your hate comments and your hate crimes together, if you are going to justify your hate crimes because of your hateful comments, you should be thrown in jail, prison, forced probation. If you are going to justify your hate crimes with your hateful comments, you should be imprisoned. You should be put in jail. There is no acceptable reason for us to be committing hate crimes. Because, oh, he's a Nazi, he's a racist, he's a socialist, he's a bigot. No. It's greater political extremism. It's dividing us as a country. And what is it going to do? It's going to lead us nowhere. I honestly believe that at the current rate of current events in the U.S., we're going to lead to a political civil war between the left and the right. It only takes one event, I believe. Now, I think, with the assassination of Charlie Kirk and the assassination attempts on Donald Trump during his campaign, I don't think the right is going to initiate a civil war or some sort of uprising. I think it'd be something that happens on the left. I think the left will initiate something so they can justify a revolution, a civil war, insurgency, whatever it may be. And I do think that what's going to happen is, inevitably we'll have a civil war between our political extremist beliefs, and our nation will crumble significantly. I mean, we might be split into two countries. We might have a new outcome. Maybe one side wins, and the extremism bleeds into the government. Maybe all society collapses together. And again, either you're with us or you're with them. And if you're not with us, we're going to kill you. This extremist belief is going to lead us to a dangerous state of our society where we go to war with one another because we cannot agree to disagree, because we cannot agree that some people have different beliefs, because we cannot agree that some of us are more tolerant of some people than others. We are neighbors, all of us. We're all created equally under God. We are all equal people. However, there are so many extremists in our current political climate who believe we are enemies above all else because we do not agree. Just because I'm not as far right as you are or not as far left as you are does not mean we are on different sides. I still stand for democracy. I still stand for cultural preservation. However, I'm not going to stand for, an authoritarian figure to come to power, lead our country, and commit genocide because, people of different cultures are coming into our country and our culture is not being preserved anymore. I do not tolerate extremist behaviors like that, where it results in killing and death and illegal actions that just justify hate. We have seen throughout history many extremist governments come to power. I mean, let's look at World War II, for example. We had fascist Italy and Nazi Germany, and we had Soviet Russia. Fascist Italy was a right wing extremist government. Nazi Germany was a right wing fascist extremist government. Soviet Russia was a left wing extremist government. All three of these governments during World War II and before and after, if they were still there, were dangerous, they were deadly, they were intolerant, and they were hateful. We should not be looking up to Benito Mussolini, Adolf Hitler, Joseph Stalin, or other political extremist figures as someone who should lead the way to rebirth our society, to fix our problems, to guide us through our issues. We should work together. To come together to fix our issues is the only way we can solve all of these problems that we're facing. There's a reason why I am pro working class and not pro corporation. There's a reason why I have green beliefs and not, drill baby drill all the way. There's a reason why I stand for democracy and not a dictatorship. And there's a reason why I'm open to freer markets than privately, not privately, government owned, government led, government instructed markets and economies.